Hello and welcome to another chapter in Forensic Accounting and Fraud Examination. We're now on to the chapter of interviewing people who are going to lead you up to the alleged fraudster. The alleged fraudster is going to be interrogated. Everyone else is going to be interviewed. So before we get into interviewing all the surrounding people, let's get some advice from an expert. Joseph Wells, who's an FBI agent and a certified fraud examiner, has some words of wisdom for us. Starts out by saying enhanced interrogation techniques, which is basically torture, is not going to work. He is talking about interviewing criminals or alleged criminals, and over his many years of experience, he has found that if you subject someone to torture, they're going to confess to crimes that they probably never even have heard of, much less have actually committed it. So it's not worth it. Something which is a piece of sobering advice is not every case can be solved. This is not easy for most of us to swallow, especially if you have been hired to solve a case. You want to come up with an answer. You want to come up with the fraudster. You want to nail the fraudster. But his advice is not every case can be solved. So sometimes you just have to walk away and say, I cannot solve it. I do not know how this was done. Not an easy thing to admit, but that's his final advice because some situations are really difficult. What he has said is, regardless of what the law says, you have to have a very high moral code when it comes to conducting interviews and interrogations. Again, it's not a question of, is it allowed? Is it legal? He's talking about your moral code. Ultimately, that's what's going to help you preserve, protect the innocent. The values that we seek to protect, we shouldn't basically violate those values by the interview process, by going through an intense, subjecting our interviewee to an intense interview process. It's not going to work. Once again, all of this is said in the context of trying to find answers for your client. You may not be able to solve everything, but you want to find answers for your clients. Your client has retained you, it's costing them money, and it's your professional reputation in line over here. But keep this in mind that not every case can be solved. With that said, let's see how we are going to conduct interviews, what we do. So conducting interviews is very important. What is interviewing? It's a systematic questioning of knowledgeable people in pursuit of details surrounding a forensic accounting issue. So now we are very specifically concerned about, within the world of fraud, we are saying, how can we solve it by using forensic accounting? So we are following the money. We want to interview people who may have knowledge about the details. So they may have knowledge of a process. Not that there was fraud committed over there. They may not even know who the fraudster is. They may not know there was any fraud over there, but they know the process. There are people who may know the individual who we think is the culprit. So they have some kind of knowledge. This person has knowledge, and you want to solve the case using forensic accounting. So we want to interview in a systematic manner. Now, interrogation is when you have a target. Target is this person you know, all your work has led you to believe there is an individual who is the alleged fraudster. So this is questioning of a subject or a target to obtain evidence and to solicit a confession. So this is at the very end. This is the very last stage. So interviewing, that's all the bulk of what you would do. The very last step is getting that admission. So where would we start? We start with something that we can get our hands on very easily. That's all the documents, document analysis. The last step will be the target. So let's see how we work our way from the first step towards the last step. So when we conduct interviews and fraud examinations, you want to start with the least culpable. Least culpable means they're not the ones we are accusing of the crime. So start with the ones who is completely on the outside and work your way to the person who's most culpable. Interview third-party witnesses, then corroborative witnesses, someone who can say, yeah, actually, I saw this happen. I know he did it. Okay, so you're kind of getting closer and closer. interview suspected co-conspirators. So now if you think that the target that you have in mind got help from someone, you now want to talk to that someone who possibly may have helped the target. So you want to see that, is there something you missed? Because a co-conspirator could give you some hints, obviously unknowingly, that may answer some of the questions that you are not quite completely sure of when you talk to the various witnesses. So what's the purpose over here of talking to all these other people? In this fashion, you will be able to get to your prime target. You have all the information necessary when you talk to the target, because remember, chances are you will get to talk to the target only once. So you want to be as ready with all the information possible. Admission seeking interviews can be avoided if interview clears target of offense. So this could be one of those things where we said not every case can be solved. Maybe you did all your homework, talked to all these people, and the person you thought is a target, lo and behold, you find is not really the target because they didn't do it. So you probably have to start trying to solve this all over again. But at least someone who you thought was the alleged fraudster is not the alleged fraudster. So you don't even have to get to that point of interviewing them and interrogating them. So you clear them even before you get to that situation. Probably chances are they are the target. The target is the offender. But if your work shows that that person is not the offender, you need to restart. Definitely let that person go. So let's take a case of looking at documents. So if you want to interview if it's fraudulent financial statements of or tax returns, okay, so you will start with the suspected predator. So you're talking to that person, okay? They claim that financial statements are not materially misstated. So this is the person who has prepared those financial statements. So in this case, you're going to the target directly. This is a different type of situation. If the auditor finds fraudulent financial accounting reporting, then you have caught the perpetrator in a lie. So remember, they said, no, everything was fine. There's no material misstatement. And if the auditor finds it, you know they've lied. They have intentionally misled the auditor. Why would they do that? Why would they lie? They're making one of two assumptions. The first assumption, some of this gets with the fraudster being arrogant, that they think the auditor is not going to find this issue. They've covered their tracks so well, or perhaps have been doing it for so long, they don't think they're going to get caught. The auditor investigator won't be skilled enough to unravel the underlying evidence. So again, if the individual thinks that they have created this web layer upon layer and no one's going to uncover it, yeah, they're going to go ahead and lie and deny and hope it's going to go away. But obviously what we're looking at over here is, in this case, the fraudster is the one who prepared those financial statements, or at least the ones who said that those they're taking responsibility for having prepared the financial statements. So this is a different type of situation when you're looking at financial statement frauds. Now, whatever type of interview you conduct, you have to have a game plan. Preparation planning is the key. You need to do extensive amount of work in preparation and planning. We'll go over that. You need to have a game plan, how you're going to conduct the interviews. The actual interviews, those are very crucial, how you line up all the people you're going to talk to. Remember, from the least culpable to the most culpable. So you need to have all the witnesses. You need to have your ducks in a row over here. And in the interview, there are 3 steps: the introduction, the body, and the close. We'll go through each of these and see how they should be done. So in the preparation and planning, what goes in? You want to do your homework. You want to know as much as possible, the ring that I showed you, any witnesses, what the crime is, who was the victim of the crime, who are the possible people committing the crime, the perpetrators, the alleged fraudsters. So you need to have all of these laid out so that you know who to talk to. Know what needs to be covered in an interview. Okay, so again, remember, just as I said, that final alleged fraudster, you'll get to talk to them perhaps only once. Even witnesses, very often if you talk to them, when you talk to the witness, the first time you talk to them, you're going to get the most information out of them at that time. After that, if you call them in again, they're going to get scared, nervous, or they just don't want to cooperate for whatever reason. So you need to know what you're going to ask in that interview. Be able to detect clues of deception. So as you're conducting your interview, if you think someone is lying to you, you need to be able to read body language, how the answers are going, various things that tell you that this person is not being honest with you. Remember, they have no, it's not a sworn testimony they're giving. They're just talking to you. You're a professional that's come in and you're asking them questions. Interviewers should have an understanding of the offense under investigation. Okay, so you need to know what the crime is. You need to know what the offense is. Have a very good understanding of it, which means you need to understand the business process. Consider the witness's background. There are some cultures, people from all different cultures, even if you're looking at an American, someone born and raised over here, depending on where they have been raised, their values are going to be a little different. We're not all the same. It could be an individual who has grown up in a family that's everyone is very respectful of each other and no one ever accuses them of anything or even suggests in any way that they could be associated with someone who is guilty of a crime. If you talk to a witness and don't know more about this individual, you could be in a lot of trouble because that interview is going to go south real fast and they are going to tell everyone else. And that's the end of your the assignment that you have on hand. Consider distractions when selecting location of interview. General rule is you want to have some kind of privacy, not just some kind of privacy. You want to be able to in a room where you can shut the doors. If you have windows, you close the blinds. Basically, you don't want any distraction, anyone looking in that you are talking to the individual or that witness is talking to you. You don't want everyone to know about it. You don't want anyone to overhear the conversation. So location is very, very important, okay? Venue should be private, ideally selected by the interrogator and be a surprise when possible. So you want to bring in that witness and don't give them time to prepare. You don't want them to even anticipate what's going on, again, if possible, okay? So how do we conduct these interviews? Physically, you want to have distance between you and the witness because you want to observe them, their entire body, the body language. Is there any signs of nervousness? Is there anything, any cues that you can see? So you want to be able to look at them. You should be at least 6 feet away, not just because of COVID, but again, the idea is you should be able to see them completely. Always be respectful. Remember, when you're talking to a witness, they are not the fraudster or the alleged fraudster. And even if it's the alleged fraudster, you have to be professional at all times. You don't want your client's case to be lost because you were not professional during an interview. Be as straightforward as you can. Don't use language or jargon that can confuse an interviewee. So sometimes people are not very knowledgeable about law. Most of us are not. We don't have that kind of technical expertise as far as law is concerned. So don't phrase questions such that they don't give you the right answer because they didn't understand the question. And also, you want to be sure to take notes, but don't waste time taking notes. Remember, the reason is because you want to observe that individual. If you sit down, if your head is down taking notes the entire time, you're not going to observe the individual. So that's the reason we say don't take detailed notes. Key is to watch for body language that suggests discomfort or deceit. Again, just because someone is uncomfortable, that does not mean they're a crook, they're the fraudster. It could simply be, again, cultural. It could be that individual is very afraid. Not unusual for people to have panic attacks over such things. They get scared. They think I'm going to lose my job. Okay, so how you conduct the interview is just as important for you as it is for the interviewee, and more importantly, your client. So keep all of these in mind when you're conducting interviews. So carrying on over here, start with background information. So now I'm talking to the interviewee. So give some background information. always have your questions organized in some kind of chronological order so that you're helping them jog their memory in a logical order. Document witnesses' connection to suspects or targets, or targets of suspects, subjects, and targets of investigation. So you want to create a storyline so that I don't want to waste my time just talking to everyone. I'm talking to someone because they have an eventual connection, directly or indirectly, to the alleged fraudster. Document discussions between witness and any of the subjects or targets. Okay, so you want to know, was there any discussion of the alleged fraud? So that's what you're getting at. You want to know, did they know each other professionally, personally, whatever the case may be? Did they have any discussions? And the discussions, obviously, I'm concerned with is of the alleged fraud. You want to determine if the witness is in possession of any pertinent documents. Did the fraudster by any chance ask this individual to hang on to certain documents? The fraudster could be clever enough to know that his or her office may be subject to someone coming and checking things, and they give it to someone else who is not subject, a lower level person, who is not subject to any kind of scrutiny. Obviously, they make sure that that other person, the one you're talking to, doesn't also know that they're holding on to some key important pieces of information. Elicit any opinions that the witness may have about the events or the acts that are under investigation. So now what you're doing over here, again, notice you started out with background information, you tried to ask questions in chronological order, you're looking at documents, what do they know? Now you're asking for their opinion. So you're finished with all the fact gathering. Now you're getting their opinion. Do they have any opinion? And if the witness has gotten comfortable with you, comfortable as in they trust you, they are going to open up at this stage. They're going to offer you some advice. Their opinion will change to advice. Now you want to see if the witness has any other ideas that we should look into, or other witnesses that would be helpful. So ask, is there anyone else I should be talking to? So you're trying to draw them into this, trying to help you solve, be a part of the solution. This is very common. When there's a problem, everyone loves to talk about the problem, but the minute you turn it around, you flip it around and say, here's a solution, what do you think? Ask them for their opinion, try to draw them in. Their entire persona changes, they're not going to complain anymore. So that's the same thing over here. You're talking to someone who may be a material witness. And after you got all the information, you ask them for their opinion and ask them, what else should I do? Ask them for their advice. So you get facts, you get their opinion, and you get their advice at the very end. So basically, you have created a rapport with this witness. So now let's look at the interviews, how you would conduct them. The introduction, body, and close. So we're going to separate these three phases. So generally a non-professional, non-confrontational tone. So you're professional, but you're not accusing them. Confrontational is you're accusing. So when you're in the introductory phase, you're not accusing anyone. If you do that, that's the end of the interview, okay? You greet the interviewee and state the reason for the interview. So again, you're establishing how you want to talk to them and the tone of the interview. You want to basically let them know that you are here because the client has retained you. You want to talk to them and you think that they'll be able to help you. So the tone should be basically non-confrontational. It should be friendly, but you're not going to sit there and become chatty with them. You want to do icebreakers, etc. with them, mini icebreakers, but you want to keep it as professional as possible. So once you've established your rapport, okay, you want to assess how cooperative they're going to be. So you've created the general mood over here for them to trust you. Trust is very important. So once you get the sense that you've created the opening for them to trust you, only then are they going to open up and start speaking to you. So this provides the beginnings of a baseline for assessment of misdirection or deceit. Okay. So basically at this point of time, if you already feel that you're not going to get cooperation, then chances are they're going to either not tell you anything or tell you something that could lead you down the wrong path. Is it because they are the fraudster? Probably not. Is it because they're covering up for the fraudster? Maybe not. It could just be an attitude that I don't care about the client. Okay, the client is their boss. They don't care about their boss. They feel whoever stole from the boss or whatever it is serves him right, serves her right. And if that kind of an attitude is there, you're already at a losing end. Hopefully, you're not in that situation. So now that you have hopefully established a good rapport, let's start with the body of the interview. Again, you start with facts. You want to gather facts. You want to gather evidence. Okay, as much as possible. Whatever you have, review it with the interviewee. You want to go over it. Okay, start out by asking open-ended questions. Allow interviewee to completely answer a question. Do not interrupt them. You asked a question. If they start answering, you asked an open-ended question. It wasn't a yes or a no kind of question. So it's an open-ended question. Let them answer it. Completely understand answers before moving on. So if there's something you're not quite understanding what the interview is saying, you want to make sure you understand it before you continue. You want to make sure they understand the question you asked, and then you understand the answers they are giving you. You want to be patient with the interviewee during the interview process, simply because you want to be respectful of them, their time, their opinion, etc. Okay, once again, this is establishing that trust, establishing that you respect them. Focus on listening, gathering information, but keep your eye open. Are they telling you the truth, or are they possibly lying to you? Okay, so you're keeping this healthy skepticism as the interview is going on. Once again, you hope that you have done all your homework. You have picked the appropriate witness to talk to. You have established a rapport. You have the proper location. You have started everything on the right foot, and that they're cooperating and answering the questions appropriately. Issues with checklists and pre-written questionnaires. Well, you want to make sure you ask all the questions that you have to, and it has to be in the right order. But don't have a checklist, because in that case, what happens is the interviewer is going to feel that they just have to answer 10 questions and you're going to let them go. Or this is something, a routine thing you're doing with everyone. There is nothing special about them. Pre-written questionnaires, that's also not good, because remember, when you ask open-ended questions, it may lead you to ask some other types of questions. If you stick with pre-written questions, you may have completely lost the opportunity of asking additional questions. Once again, if you have planned and prepared, you mentally have a checklist. You mentally have questions that you want to ask, but don't read from it. That's the worst thing you can do during an interview. So how do you close an interview? You want to review and summarize all the important aspects of the interview. So all the highlights. So you start out once again with your confirming their name, their position, their rank, all those kind of things, all the highlights, how they knew the person X. X is your target, okay? How do they know the procedure? What's the process? What's their job description? Any of those things, that questions that you had asked and they had answered, you're trying to summarize it because you're giving them an opportunity to make corrections. And in many cases, you're giving them an opportunity to come back and say, oh, I forgot to tell you this. I forgot to tell you that. Or let me add something. So this process is really good in that you're summarizing all the information you got and giving them an opportunity to give you more information. Clarify any questions regarding the interviewee's responses, as in if there was something they had said and you were not 100% sure, or you think that this was not the kind of answer you were expecting, Clarify it and make sure that they understood your question. Attempt to end the interview on a positive note. You want to start it on a positive note, keep the entire interview positive, and end it on a positive note. You have no ill will with this person. You have actually no ill will with any of them. Your client has retained you to interview these, to basically solve a case. And you're talking to these people. None of these individuals probably are required to talk to you. So you want to be respectful of them the entire time. And being positive is one sign of being respectful. And you should let them know that I may come back and ask you more questions. And if you have more answers, come back to me. So you're leaving an open door over there. So you've done document analysis, you've interviewed all these surrounding people, and now you're ready to get to the last step, which is the target, your alleged fraudster. So when you're doing these interviews over here, now they are interrogations. So now you want to get the final confession. So 2 steps over here. You introduce yourself, you introduce the case. Well, it's not like they don't know because you think that they are the ones who've done it, but you want to get admission from them that yes, they did it. So you want to present all your evidence in a way in which that individual has no option but to admit what their involvement is in the case. So it's reserved for obtaining confessions from those believed to be culpable of the act under examination. So the one I think is responsible for the act, the alleged fraud that I'm examining, I'm doing the examination, whether it's a forensic examination, fraud examination, whatever the case may be. I want to get to a point where I can obtain that confession from them. So you have 2 main phases. You will do the introduction and the process of obtaining the confession itself. So what are we trying to do over here? You know this person is a target. All your evidence suggests they are the target, they are the fraudster, the alleged fraudster. Now you want them to confess to being the fraudster. All up to this point of time, they are the alleged fraudster. Okay. Now what you want to do is you want to help them get to this point where they say, yes, I committed the crime. Now keep in mind the first thing that we talked about in the first slide. You are not going to torture anyone. We are not FBI. We are not going to do that kind of torture. But again, even the emotional torture that people are subject to, if someone has actually committed some crime along these lines that we're talking about over here, the stealing money, whatever, stealing assets, etc. We've talked about the fraud triangle. There was opportunity, there were pressures, the rationalization, whatever the case may be. It is very hard for someone to admit that, yes, I did it. So what we're trying to do is try to find out, why did they do it? What's the rationalization? Sometimes for the fraudster, admitting to that rationalization, how they rationalized what they did, it just kind of helps them make that confession and accept what they did. So you're trying to get to that point where you're helping them with their thought process. Again, it's extremely rare that someone has done all of this and not thought through this whole process. They have probably lived with it day and night, and in a lot of cases, people have said they could not sleep for days on end, and they are so happy someone has come and talked to them. They want it to end. Again, we're not talking about the FBI, for lack of a better word, again, torturing individuals and them saying, I want this to end. We are talking about probably civil cases in which the fraudster, the alleged fraudster, wants it to end because they have been carrying it on for so long. The burden on them is pretty intense. So let's look at the questions. Okay, you are going to have introductory questions, informational questions, and closing questions. Let's go back for a second over here. The introductory, informational, closing. We also have assessment questions and the admission seeking question. The last one is fairly easy. That's the end. Okay, so what are we doing over here? Why have introductory questions? Obviously, you want to remember you're going to get only one chance. So you want to introduce yourself and the case to them. Establish rapport, very, very important. Let them know what the theme of the interview is. There should be no two things in mind, that you're basically letting them know that this is the end. Observe their reactions as you start through this process, okay? So general rules for the introductory phase. You will always interview only one person at a time. It doesn't matter whether you have a giant arena or just a single office, a small office, one person at a time. You want privacy over there. Absolutely, 100%. You want to make sure that that person, their privacy is ensured over here. You want to start out again by non-sensitive questions. You want to make sure that they're going to work with you. So if they start out by saying, I'm not going to talk to you, I don't want to talk to you, I want my lawyer, I know my rights, you already know that this person is not going to give you any information. Now you want to move into make a transitional statement. So you're basically saying, okay, here's who I am, here's what we're going to talk about. And now you move into the phase where you say, okay, I'm now getting to this point where I'm going to talk to you about this fraud. And you want to keep talking to them where you're getting continuous agreement as to, yes, I'm going to talk to you. Yes, I'm going to be honest. Okay. We cannot promise confidentiality. Why not? Well, all the information I collect is not mine to keep. I've been retained by my client. All the information belongs to my client. My client at any point of time could terminate my contract, and I have to surrender everything to that to my client, all the information I've gathered. So I can't promise confidentiality. So you are going to say that your client has retained you. Okay, so you're not making any bones about it, that you're here in a professional capacity. Negotiations. You do not have any right to make any negotiations on behalf of your client. So don't promise any of that, okay? Discussing source of allegations. You don't want to say X told me, but you could perhaps say that this is the evidence I have, this is the information I have, that is basically putting you on the spot. And you will say, I've got it from credible sources. I have people who have signed something, giving me this information that you're the one who did the journal entry. You're the one that made the bank deposits. Okay. So you want to basically kind of, everything you're doing over here right now is to make sure that this person knows that they're canned. So informational questions, you've gathered all your facts. Okay, we talked about the open questions. There could be closed questions, which is the yes or no. Are you responsible for accounts receivable? Are you responsible for bank reconciliation? Those are yes or no answers, it's not a maybe. Leading questions is you're trying to draw them to a topic that you want them to talk about, or say that, no, this is not the case. You want them to explain something. Again, questions should be from general to specific. Let's go through some of these quickly over here. Methodology. Again, start with background questions. You're looking at the suspect the entire time. Okay. You want to approach those sensitive questions very carefully. Remember, unlike talking to a witness, when you're talking to a witness, they are not the alleged fraudster. But now when you're talking to the target, the alleged fraudster, you are going to accuse them of the alleged fraud. So how you ask those questions become extremely important. Well, they're not going to be easy to deal with. They're going to be extremely emotional because they know their house of cards is collapsing, okay? So if they become very difficult, they become confrontational, they start accusing you of things, start accusing others of things, you are not in a position as a professional to react to any of this. As in, you shouldn't start defending X, Y, or Z. That's not your job, okay? You want to try to disarm the person. We're not talking about physically disarming a person. You're talking about trying to bring down all their tear down their what the reason why they are attacking you now. You want to basically say that doesn't make sense, or this pot of cash has been stolen. Okay, so there's no way around it. So let's face it, it has been stolen. We have talked to everyone else. So you're trying to disarm them and say, you could accuse me, you could jump, you could scream right now, but the facts are the facts. That's how you disarm them. You could change tactics. So you want to try and talk to them, start probably reasoning with them. Uh, some examples the textbook uses when people get extremely emotional and that rationalization, the pressure they were under, uh, especially right now that we know so many people are under so much financial pressure because they have lost a job, their spouse has lost a job, they're behind in rent, they're afraid of getting evicted. If think in all this, if you have a family member that is not well, it's a child that's not well, it's really, really emotional for someone to admit that they did this for the child because no one wants to do that. Uh, you all want your children to think the best of you. And the last thing you want is that you steal for your child. That's not going to be good. So, change of tactics is try and talk about some of those emotional situations they possibly are under. Once again, if you have done your homework, you already know all the surrounding facts. Some interviews could be very volatile. Okay, so if this is the case, you want to have two interviewers, you want to have someone else with you. I've heard it several ACFE seminars when we've had experts come and talk. Uh, there was one fraud examiner up in New Jersey. He was doing forensic accounting, and this was he had been retained by an insurance company that was looking into an insurance claim that had been put by a restaurant that had completely gotten burnt, was burnt down, completely ruined. And all his investigation led him to believe that the restaurant owner had committed arson. And our guest speaker at this meeting said the best money he ever spent was hiring a private security bodyguard for himself for the duration of when he had to go to court and testify. It was 3 weeks. Eventually, he was compensated by his client for all of his expenses that he incurred, these additional expenses. But again, you're talking about people getting very emotional. There is so much riding on the line for them. If you think even within an interview that's likely to happen, you want to have a second person over there. So two interviewers is not a bad idea. It's more people, therefore more money for you. But it's time, money well spent and two people's time well spent. Uh, Again, if you can get this person by surprise, don't give them a chance to prepare. In most cases, they probably will run. They're not going to show up. But if you can prepare, get them by surprise, you are fully prepared for the interview, but they come in on a surprise basis, you're most likely to be successful in that case. Uh, Order of questions should be out of sequence. So if it's a volatile interview, you don't want to go in a logical order, which is leading them down the path where they know they're going to be canned. Okay. Start asking hypothetical questions. You want to find out, well, what happened over here? You want to kind of get them involved so that they can answer questions reasonably. Closing, you're reconfirming facts, go over key facts. You don't want to revisit every last piece of information, just the key facts. If there's an opportunity, gather additional information. Is there any additional information you have for me? Is there someone else I should talk to? Again, the same things we are going over. Provide an opportunity to furnish relevant facts. So basically, you're keeping the door open over here. When you're concluding the interview, you want to kind of make sure that this was a positive experience as much as possible. All of these are emotional situations, but you want to know that that person feels they were treated fairly. That is very important, the perception. Were they treated fairly? Give them an opportunity to give some more information. Okay. Assessment questions. This is basically looking at, okay, I want to go with this here. Anytime you're doing an interview or an interrogation, you want to be sure that the person responding to you is being honest. So some norming questions, also called calibrating questions, is you want to observe their behavior before a critical question. So there are things that people do when someone is asked a question which they feel very insulted. Again, it doesn't mean they've committed any fraud. It's not uncommon for people to cross their hand and sit back, basically taking a position of command and saying, "How dare you ask me this question?" These are all called the nonverbal clues. You're looking for all these nonverbal clues. Was this person insulted with this question? Was this person nervous? Why were they nervous when I asked this question? So when you're looking at a critical question, what you're doing is it's called a norming question. You're looking to see how did they behave, okay? Again, methodology, general to specific, least culpable to most culpable, least sensitive question to most sensitive question, because that final most sensitive question, you did it. Why did you do it? How did you do it? Those are accusations. And that person, if they answer it, it means they're admitting guilt. Okay, so that sensitive question is reserved for the alleged fraudster. Now, how do we get them to finally admit to things? It's reserved only for the one. We have gathered information. We are not just suspicious of them. We have evidence to show that this person is the one who committed the alleged fraud. So, suspect now becomes a subject. Okay, you have to clear anyone who is innocent, and you want to encourage anyone who is guilty, culpable person to confess, the guilty person to confess. Okay, so once again, objective over here is I want to get rid of all the white noise. I want to get rid of all the other information and all the other people and zero in on the target. Again, why are we doing this? An innocent person is not going to admit to a crime. Go back and think of the first slide, what the FBI agent said, Joseph Wells said. Don't create the situation where an innocent person confesses. Then you've really lost your case. You want the culpable person to confess. You want to have a valid confession. It cannot be under duress. You cannot coerce them. It has to be valid, which means they are saying this out of their own free will. Yes, I did it. When they say that, you want it in writing. You could help them write the statement, as in you can state the facts, all the evidence that you've gathered, you can state all of it, but you want it in their own writing. You want them to confess it. It shouldn't be, I asked them to sign on a blank piece of paper. That is not going to hold in court. If they sign a blank piece of paper and then I fill in stuff, not going to happen. They have to write it. They're acknowledging all the facts. Now, should I have anyone else witness this? Presence of outsiders. Usually not subject for information, usually not necessary to inform subject that they can have an attorney present. In fact, in most private business settings, they're not entitled to have an attorney. So if the boss calls them in and asks a question, if you start out by saying, "Oh, I need my attorney here," your boss is going to fire you. So if it's anything work related, they don't need an attorney. Representatives shouldn't ask questions or object. Okay, so if there was someone allowed, it's not uncommon if there are unions, that a union representative is allowed to be there. If they're considered an outsider because they are not the ones being questioned, they can just be there and observe, but they are not allowed to ask any questions. They're not allowed to object. Now, the Miranda warnings that you're all familiar with, it doesn't apply to what we are looking at in a workplace, okay? So what's our theme over here? Convince respondent that confession is in their best interest. So basically you tell them, I have all the evidence to prove you did it. All these witnesses, all these documents that say you did it. If you say you do it, this is over. It doesn't continue. It's in your best interest to stop this. You want to offer a morally acceptable reason for the confessor's behavior. That's a rationalization. Once again, If this person was just doing it for the sake of stealing, well, there is no more morally acceptable reason. But if someone has been in a personal difficult situation, you want to talk to them about it because you want them to just get this out. The non-shareable pressure is a pressure that people face is it could kill a person. That's how intense it is. If you feel there's something that you have done wrong and there is no one you can talk to, that's the worst thing in the world. And that's probably the situation they are in. So you kind of want to get them out of that mode that they cannot share this with anyone. Maximize sympathy and minimize perception of moral wrongdoing. So you don't want to act very judgmental and say, oh, you are a terrible person. You can offer your sympathy. Again, as I've said, financial pressures are all around right now around us. Who is not in a financially difficult situation? Very few people. You can empathize with people about their situation. Don't judge someone. And that's really what we're looking at over here. Subject skills should already be assumed in the form of a question. Okay, so it's not, you're basically saying you did it. Okay, so you're saying, why did you do it? When you ask the question, why did you do it? The assumption over here is they did it. You're just asking them, why did you do it? Okay, so there's no question that they did it. So that guilt is already assumed now. So we are getting to this final phase. We want to nail everything. We want them to confess. You want them to put it in writing. Be careful of accusing innocent person of a crime. Again, if you've done your homework, as you're doing your work and you get to this final stage, if you find out that this person you're going to accuse is in fact innocent, you need to drop it. In fact, in many cases, you probably have to apologize for them even being brought to this point of being accused. Again, the whole idea is you want to get to the party who has committed the crime. You want to solve the case. Not every case is solvable. And if you could not do it, that's okay. But don't accuse an innocent person. So we need to be very careful of that. So let's get back to what Joseph Wells has his final words of wisdom on the subject. Preparation. You need to do your homework. Okay, so preparation is a key to success. However, as you go along, as you get new information, things could change. And in some cases, the situation evolves so rapidly, you need to be on your toes, thinking as you go along. Always watch for the nonverbal behavior, body language. What are they doing? Okay. You need to establish the tone of the interview. You should be in command of the interview, not the interviewee, not the subject. You should be in command of the interview. You set the tone, you set the pace of the interview. Once you start asking questions, keep quiet. Listen. You want to hear. You've done your homework, you have all the information. Now you want to hear. You're getting this key person, the key witness to talk to you. You want to get all that information and you can't get it if you start talking. You need to shut up and let the interviewee do the talking. Don't run around in circles. Be straightforward. And this is hard because sometimes you will have some witnesses who will want to talk and talk and talk. You want to kind of keep the interview on track, but be patient. You want to keep circling back to your main point. You want to stay on target. And finally, get it in writing. Because if you do not have it in writing, it is your word versus someone else's word. And that's not going to do anyone any good, especially it's not going to do your client any good if they don't have that in writing. Okay. So steps in the admission seeking interview: accuse the subject, observe their reaction, repeat the accusation. If they start denying, you want to interrupt those denials. You want to establish the rationalization, diffuse alibis. If they say, oh, he can say I was there, she can say I was there or not there, you say, I have already talked to he, she, whoever else, and no, I have all of that, so you are it. Okay. Present the alternative. Okay, so tell them, okay, if you didn't do it, what's up over here? Okay, it's you're basically boxing them in with the evidence. Don't just accuse them. You want to present the evidence. Obtain the benchmark admission, transition to verbal confession, and then you want the signed statement. Okay, so you want the written confession. It should have it has more credibility than oral confession. Uh, it's going to discourage a culpable person from later attempting to recant. So if someone is guilty, people are not going to put something in writing unless they're really guilty. So don't want to give an opportunity to someone who has made an oral confession to later on say, oh no, I didn't say it. So when they say it, you want it in writing. Okay, so what are some of the key points? What needs to be included? Start with, it's a voluntary confession. What's the intent? What did they intend to do? Okay, what's the approximate date of the offense? How much did they steal? How many times did they steal? Okay, their willingness to cooperate, basically saying, I'll help you, I'll give you more information. Okay, excuse clause, have the confessor read the statement. So basically, after they've written everything, ask them to read it. Okay, and ask them again, is this really true? You talked to them, they wrote it, but you're again giving them an opportunity to walk away from it right now. Once they've done all of it, they sign the statement. Okay. So how do you judge deception? You look for the physiology of deception. I told you how when people are nervous, there are things that people do. Sometimes if someone is nervous, it could be they're just having a little bit of anxiety. But in some cases, when people lie, there are certain things they would do. They roll their eyes, they wave their hands, they start swearing, the verbal clues. They will basically start saying, you can get this one, you can get that one to, ask them, am I a criminal? Am I a liar? All of these are verbal cues that this person wants to basically say, I'm not a liar, in which they are a liar and they're telling you something that is not true. Look for nonverbal clues. You should have a really good idea if this person is lying, and you should have that ability to judge. That comes with experience. On your first case, you probably won't be able to do it, which is why you will not be sent out on a case on your first day. You will be working as an unhead, as an assistant, until you get to that point where you can judge this. Again, real quickly going through this over here. When you talk about physiology, it produces stress. We can draw inferences from their behavior, outright lying, omission of information, misdirection, attempting to manipulate the interviewer. Physical environment can affect behavior. This basically is saying that sometimes there are people who have panic attacks if they just are called into the boss's office. If you can think back of as a kid, if you were ever called to the principal's office in school, that felt like the end of the world. That it may have been it may have been completely unrelated to anything you were doing, but people have certain reactions to certain physical environments. So be mindful of that. Personal bias of interviewer could affect how the outcome of how this whole thing goes on. So you want to be careful. You may have a bias, the interviewee may have a bias against you. For instance, if I start out by saying what my title is, that could cause a bias. It could actually cause confusion. They may not know what your title is and what it means. So all of these could lead to a lot of stress for with the interviewee. So you want to be very careful with all of this, okay? An interview under the influence is unsuitable. That's obvious for obvious reasons. Behavior of juveniles is unreliable, and we can carefully note ethnic and economic factors. I started out by telling you about our cultural backgrounds are all different. Kids behave very unreliably simply because they're immature for no other reason. And chances are, although we think kids manipulate us a lot, they're relatively innocent. They don't think through the whole process. They don't know consequences of certain things. So once again, hopefully we are not in a situation when we are talking to juveniles in our as certified fraud examiners. Here are various verbal clues. As I said, when people start making oaths, they have character testimony. Uh, they start answering questions even before they are asked. Uh, they, these are all various ways in which you can tell that the individual is trying to think when they start making these oaths and character testimonies. What they're trying to do is think of how can I get out of this situation? So you know you need to change your tactics very quickly. If someone starts saying, oh, call so and talk to them, call this one, call that one, just cut them off, okay? And you need to move on because you don't want to uh, let them take control of the interview. And here's another one, reluctance to terminate interview. They don't want the interview to end because they somehow feel that at the end of the interview, they're going to be nailed. That's the end. So these are all cues that you have that you need to watch out for. Now, this does not mean that they have committed the fraud or they know even the fraudster. There could be something else that's causing them to deceive you. Be that as it may, our concern is my interview is tainted if they are lying to me. Nonverbal cues, again, you're looking for the whole, the physical appearance of the individual, how it changes as they're talking to you, as they're answering questions. Again, this is when you don't want to have your head down taking notes. You want to be looking at them. You want to have eye contact. You want to look at their body. Okay. Skip through this one here. Information collected in financial interviews. Again, some of these we've talked about in the previous class, so I'm going to not go over these details. A lot of this really is, if you have done your homework, you're just verifying this information from them. You're not going to, actually, this should not be the time when you collect the information for the first time. So once again, what we have seen over here is, we have seen different situations